Tonight we delve into the unsettling world of the night shift, where darkness reigns and shadows dance. We have 3 spine-chilling true ghost stories from people who have experienced the paranormal while working the graveyard shift. These are the accounts of those who dared to confront the unknown in the dead of night. The witnesses, everyday people just like you and me, found themselves face to face with the unexplained. Their stories will send shivers down your spine and make you question the very fabric of reality. Turn off the lights, sit back, and prepare to be terrified. These are their stories. Our first story takes us to the desolate outskirts of a nameless city, where a lone security guard named Mark found himself guarding a dilapidated old factory. The factory, once a bustling hub of industry, now stood as a skeletal reminder of a bygone era, its windows like vacant eyes staring out into the night. Mark, a sturdy man with a no-nonsense demeanor, had heard the rumors. Whispers of strange occurrences, unexplained noises, and even sightings of shadowy figures lurking in the darkened corridors. But Mark, a man of logic and reason, dismissed these tales as nothing more than the overactive imaginations of bored teenagers looking for a thrill. One particularly dark and stormy night, as Mark made his rounds, his flashlight cutting through the thick darkness, he felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He paused, listening intently, but there was nothing but the sound of the wind howling through the broken windows. Continuing his patrol, Mark approached the factory's main production floor, an immense cavernous space filled with rusted machinery and shrouded in an eerie silence. As he stepped through the doorway, his flashlight flickered, plunging him into momentary darkness. When the beam flickered back to life, Mark's heart leapt into his throat. Standing at the far end of the production floor, partially obscured by shadows, was a figure. It was tall and gaunt, its form indistinct in the dim light, but there was no mistaking its presence. Fear, cold and primal, gripped Mark's chest as he fumbled for the radio on his belt. His fingers trembled as he pressed the transmit button, his voice a strained whisper as he called for backup. His eyes never left the figure, which stood motionless, as if observing him. Suddenly the figure began to move, gliding silently towards Mark, its feet seemingly not touching the ground. Panic surged through Mark as he stumbled backward, his flashlight beam dancing wildly across the factory floor. The radio crackled to life, but the voice on the other end was drowned out by the pounding of Mark's heart. He backed away slowly, never taking his eyes off the approaching figure. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, its form shifting and distorting in the flickering light. Just as the figure was about to reach him, Mark turned and ran, his heart pounding in his ears. He didn't stop running until he reached the relative safety of the factory gate, his lungs burning, his body trembling with fear. Looking back, he saw nothing but the darkened silhouette of the factory against the storm-tossed sky. Mark never returned to the factory, his encounter leaving an indelible mark on his psyche. The memory of that night, of the shadowy figure gliding towards him in the darkness, continued to haunt his dreams. Some say the factory was haunted by the ghost of a former worker who had met an untimely end within its walls. Others claimed it was something far more sinister, something that lurked in the shadows, feeding on the fear of those unfortunate enough to cross its path. Whatever the truth may be, Mark's experience serves as a chilling reminder that some places are best left undisturbed, especially in the dead of night. Our next story takes us to the sterile, brightly lit halls of a bustling city hospital, where a young nurse named Sarah found herself working the night shift in the intensive care unit. Sarah, a compassionate and dedicated nurse, was known for her calm demeanor and her unwavering commitment to her patients. One particularly busy night, as Sarah made her rounds, checking vital signs and administering medication, she noticed a new patient had been admitted to room 117. The patient, an elderly man named John Doe, had been brought in by ambulance, unconscious and suffering from an unknown ailment. Sarah approached Mr. Doe's room, her heart heavy with a sense of foreboding. There was something about the patient, something in his pale, gaunt features and the stillness of his frail form that sent a shiver down her spine. As she reviewed his chart, she was surprised to find that there was very little information available. No next of kin, no medical history, no indication of how he had ended up in their care. Despite her growing unease, Sarah pushed her apprehension aside and focused on her duties. She checked his vital signs, hooked him up to the various monitors, and made sure he was as comfortable as possible. Throughout the night, Sarah found herself drawn back to Mr. Doe's room as if compelled by an unseen force. Each time she checked on him, she felt a cold spot in the air around his bed and an unsettling feeling that she was not alone. As the night wore on, Sarah noticed that Mr. Doe's vital signs, which had been weak but stable, began to fluctuate erratically. She tried everything she could to stabilize him, but it was as if something was draining the life force from his frail body. Desperate, Sarah called for the attending physician, but by the time he arrived, Mr. Doe's vitals had flatlined. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to revive him. As Sarah and the doctor were filling out the necessary paperwork, the doctor received an urgent call. He excused himself, leaving Sarah alone in the nurse's station. As Sarah sat there, lost in thought, she glanced up at the clock on the wall. It was almost 4 a.m., the hour when shadows seemed to lengthen and the veil between the living and the dead felt thinnest. Suddenly, a cold chill swept through the room, and Sarah felt a presence behind her. She turned slowly, her heart pounding in her chest, and gasped. Standing in the doorway, bathed in the pale light of the hallway, was Mr. Doe. He was fully clothed, his eyes open and alert, and a faint smile played on his lips. Before Sarah could speak, Mr. Doe simply nodded his head in acknowledgement, turned and walked down the hallway. Sarah, stunned and terrified, jumped up and ran after him, but when she reached the end of the hallway, Mr. Doe was gone. The doctor returned a few minutes later, and Sarah, still shaken, told him what she had seen. The doctor, a man of science and logic, dismissed her story as exhaustion and stress. But Sarah knew what she had seen. She had seen Mr. Doe, alive and well, long after he had been pronounced dead. Some say that Mr. Doe was never really a patient, but a lost soul, searching for peace. Others believe that he was there to deliver a message, a warning, or perhaps even a final farewell. Whatever the truth may be, Sarah's encounter with the vanishing patient serves as a chilling reminder that death is not always the end, and that sometimes the veil between the living and the dead can be terrifyingly thin. Our final story takes us to a sprawling office complex where a solitary janitor named Michael found himself working the graveyard shift, cleaning and preparing the building for the next day's work. Michael, a quiet man with a solitary nature, found solace in the silence of the empty building. He had been working there for years, and he had grown accustomed to the eerie quiet and the strange shadows that seemed to dance in the dim light of his cleaning cart. One night, as Michael was making his rounds, emptying trash cans and wiping down desks, he began to hear strange noises. It started subtly, a faint tapping sound coming from the floor above him. Michael paused, listening intently, but the sound had stopped. He shrugged it off as his imagination and continued his work. As he pushed his cart down the hallway, the tapping returned, this time louder and more insistent. It seemed to be coming from the CEO's office, a large corner office at the end of the hall. Michael, his curiosity piqued, cautiously approached the office door. The tapping was now a steady drumming, and Michael could have sworn he heard faint voices whispering just beyond the heavy wooden door. He reached for the doorknob, his hand trembling slightly. As he turned the knob and pushed the door open, the voices and the tapping abruptly stopped. The office was dark, the only light coming from the moon shining through the large windows overlooking the city. Michael flicked on the light switch, but nothing happened. The bulb must have burned out, he thought to himself. He stepped inside, pulling his cleaning cart behind him, and began to search for the light switch on the wall. As he did so, he felt a cold spot in the air, and he could have sworn he saw a fleeting shadow move out of the corner of his eye. Suddenly the door slammed shut with a resounding boom, plunging Michael into darkness. He jumped back, startled, his heart racing. He fumbled for his lighter, his hands shaking, and finally managed to strike a flame. The flickering light illuminated the office, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. The furniture was all in place, the desk was clean, and there was no sign of any forced entry. Michael, his heart still pounding in his chest, quickly gathered his cleaning supplies and exited the office, locking the door behind him. As he hurried down the hallway, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every shadow seemed to hold a sinister shape, and the silence of the building was now deafening. From that night forward, Michael avoided the CEO's office. Whenever he had to clean that floor, he would prop the office door open with a heavy wastebasket, refusing to be trapped inside again. Some say that the office building was built on an ancient burial ground, and the spirits of those who had been laid to rest there were still restless. Others claimed that the office was haunted by the ghost of a former CEO who had died under mysterious circumstances. Whatever the truth may be, Michael's encounter with the unexplained noises and the slamming door served as a chilling reminder that even in the most mundane of places, the darkness can hold terrifying secrets. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more terrifying tales. And remember, the next time you're working the night shift, you might not be alone. The darkness holds many secrets, and sometimes those secrets come to light in the most unexpected ways. Sleep well and be careful out there.